You're working on other projects, including a project related to football, what we in the States call soccer. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, well, this campaign, which is the Desert Rose campaign, coordinated by OHCHR, and that has as its immediate goal removing Israeli football from UEFA, the European Football Federation, and ultimately also from FIFA. Although I gather the Israeli team is not going to make it to the World Cup, but is patterned on experiences in the past. You will remember apartheid South Africa, where the sports boycotts were very important to building the movement against apartheid. That's happening here as well. And this is a very creative campaign that has seen, for example, billboards lit up in Times Square saying Israel is committing genocide in bold letters, and that they should not be allowed to participate in football. A full page ad in the Los Angeles Times saying Israel is perpetrating genocide and that they shouldn't be allowed to do this. A whole range of media and social media activities, and a campaign that is involving prominent international people across countries to build the movement to ban Israeli teams, the Israeli national team, and Israeli teams from participating in football. Sport is an extremely powerful social force, but it's also an extremely powerful force for normalization. And the idea that you can have effectively Israel represent as it's perpetrating genocide, as it's perpetrating apartheid, as it's perpetrating persecution and a host of other crimes, to be able to just behave as if normally in sports and in culture and in what is it called, the Eurovision Song Contest, all of these kinds. This all contributes to the normalization of a regime that must not be normalized, to the normalization of crimes that must not be normalized. And so, learning from the experiences of the past of these kinds of sport boycotts, this campaign is working to try to put an end to that normalization.
Can a BDS campaign that was successful against South Africa ever work against Israel? What are the takeaways and applications, and what are the differences?
Well, it can, and it's interesting. This is one of the issues that has been examined by the Gaza Tribunal as well, with experts who have been testifying on the importance of that model of boycott and divestment and sanction adopted from the experience in South Africa and applied for years now quite successfully to the isolation of the Israeli regime. So, BDS has registered a lot of successes in getting major corporations to withdraw their complicity with the Israeli regime. And overall, what that contributes to is the isolation of the regime and making it more difficult for those who normally don't pay attention to such things to contribute to the normalization of the regime. It's not a magic pill that is going to liberate the Palestinian people overnight, but as a part of a larger campaign of solidarity with the Palestinian people and insistence on the application of international law. You will remember that Francesca Albanese has produced a very compelling report showing how these companies are actually the lifeblood of occupation, of apartheid, of genocide in Palestine, and that the Israeli regime couldn't do it without them. And so that pressure to pull that support away from the regime is an extremely important piece of the larger struggle for solidarity and ultimately for justice. So yeah, I believe it's hugely important. And whatever we're doing in our medium-term goals, maintaining that drumbeat of BDS and of isolation of the regime and a rejection of normalization is an extremely important piece of the struggle.
Great. And there was, of course, a fascinating, disturbing relationship between apartheid South Africa and Israel, which I have to do a whole episode on. Um, there was no APAC, though, correct? I mean, there was no African equivalent of APAC or Kufi.
Yeah, there's no doubt that the degree of political capture enjoyed by Israel proxies is much greater than that of South Africa. But South Africa was viewed as a part of the West and as a creation of the West, just as Israel is viewed as a part of the West and as a creation of the West, as a colonial creation of the West. And, it's one of the great coincidences of history was 1948 was the year, you've heard me say this before, where the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted, where the Genocide Convention was adopted, but it was also the year of the Nakba in Palestine and the year that apartheid was initiated in South Africa. And that showed you how the West was trying to create exceptions, to carve out exceptions to these new human rights rules that were being developed for its colonies in the global South, and especially in Palestine and in Southern Africa. And the difference is that the global solidarity movement, the work of international institutions, with regard to South African apartheid, they maintained their demand on equality, on freedom, on human rights, and on international law when it came to South Africa until South Africa was free.
Hmm.
They dropped all of that with the advent of Oslo 35 years ago and said, no, we've got this political process. We're not going to raise these kinds of claims anymore. So we lost 3 decades. The Palestinian people lost 3 decades effectively in the struggle. And now what you see happening with the Trump plan and the French Saudi plan is an attempt to return to that smokescreen of a framework in which, as you've heard me say, the Palestinians are told they have to negotiate for their rights with their oppressor, and that the mediator will be their co-oppressor in the United States of America. That is, I think, a non-starter, and I think the Palestinian leadership will have to be wise enough not to fall for that again. Um, so there are many parallels, but it is different now. It is a harder climb because of the degree of capture of Western institutions, because of the complicity of Zionist billionaires, the Adelsons of the world, and others, because of the degree to which the US Congress is bought and paid for by an oppressive foreign regime and its proxies, the complicity of Western media corporations. All of that makes it much harder. But, remember that the West, and especially the United States, was supporting the apartheid regime in South Africa right up till the end of the 1980s.
Right.
And like years into his term, Nelson Mandela was still registered as a terrorist in the United States. It was the people, it was the synagogues and the churches and the mosques and the labor unions and the organizers and the human rights defenders and the peace activists and ordinary people who continued through BDS and other acts of solidarity to put the pressure on until it was impossible for Western support for apartheid to be sustained. And that's our mission now with
Right.
regard to Israeli apartheid and genocide and occupation.
And artists like Keith Haring and musicians also,
Yes.
yeah. The Gaza Tribunal that's being held in Istanbul that Craig himself helped organize. I'll also be not only covering it, but delivering testimony there on the complicity of media in the genocide. And this tribunal is taking place from October 23rd to October 26th. So make sure that you subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. That's the Katie Helper Show by hitting subscribe and then the bell so you don't miss any streams that I do while I'm there and any media posts that I make. Also follow me on social media. That's KT Helps, letter K, letter T, HALPS. That's my handle on Instagram and on Twitter. You can also find me on Facebook. And again, I will be posting live streams and interviews and clips throughout the tribunal. So again, press subscribe and then hit the bell. Also, make sure that you hit the thumbs up. Only do it once so you don't cancel it. And that helps beat the algorithmic suppression.